MCAT 2017 Cram, Critical Analysis and Reasoning Skills, Flashcard Set 8.1, Film Adaptation of Chinese Literature, Foundations of Comprehension. As you view the reading of this passage, you'll notice some highlighted sections of text. What I want you to do is garner meaning from these specific selections in order to help you answer the foundations of comprehension type question that follows the passage. It will require you to demonstrate that you recognize an accurate paraphrase or summary of the central theme. All right? Okay. Good luck and happy reading, or happy viewing, I should say. Paragraph 1. The studies of adaptation tend to privilege literature over film, but not the other way around, and assume that a film adaptation has certain responsibility to remain faithful to the spirit of the text upon which it is based. The main purpose of Hsu Huang Detman's book, adapted for the screen, The Cultural Politics of Modern Chinese Fiction and Film, I would argue, is to provide some alternative thoughts besides. This assumption of how film and fiction should be viewed in adaptation studies. Detman is interested in how filmmakers have gone about the business and art of transposition from one medium to another. This transposition and the processes involved in it, in turn, enrich our understanding of the interconnectedness of the cultural context of texts and artists in Chinese films and fictions. In other words, Detman does not simply deal with the issue of what can be transferred in moving from fiction to film, namely narrative, and what cannot be. More importantly, she investigates the distinct ideological goals of writer and filmmaker that contribute to the differences between text and films. Paragraph 2. Detman looks at the connections between film and fiction in the context of various Chinese communities on the one hand and contemplates their differences on the other hand. For example, one case study that Detman uses to illustrate gender politics is the adaptation of Su Tong's novel Wives and Concubines into Zhang Yimou's film Raise the Red Lantern. Detman argues that Zhang draws from the strengths of Su's plots and reconfigures the story's narrative codes, notably transforming a key symbolic site in the novel. A defunct meaning no longer functioning, definitions are not a part of the original text. Well in a back garden, into a rooftop death chamber. As a result, Song's new metaphor illustrates the important directional option of changing the staging of the story to maximize the cinematic effect. The well in the novella, a novella is a short novel or a long story, and the compound roof in the film not only map out key theoretical differences between the two texts, but the distinct approaches to the exploitation of women also reflect profoundly different conceptions of the relationship between art and society. These two metaphorical spaces, Detman suggests, not only juxtapose meaning place or deal close together for contrasting effect, the fluidity of feminine ambivalence, ambivalence meaning the state of having mixed feelings or contradictory ideas about something or someone, with the solidity of the patriarch's iron rule, but also open up very distinct imaginary space for the reader and the viewer. Paragraph 3. Many scholars argue that the one thing that literature and film have in common is narrative. By narrative, I mean a series of events, sequentially connected by virtue of their involving a continuing set of characters. Detman questions this assumption in her book. One example is the adaptation of Liu Yichang's novel Intersection into Wong Kar-wai's film In the Mood for Love. In Detman's analysis, Wang appears to radically distill Liu's novel into something other than three frames containing three separate quotations: the opening shot, an intertitle, and a concluding still. Instead of reconstructing the literary narrative, Wang creates a new storyline, thereby challenging the assumption shared by many adaptation scholars that narrative is the property that makes two media commensurable. Commensurable meaning measurable by the same standard. Liberating filmic adaptation from almost every question of fidelity. Wang's style pushes us to recognize that Detman calls what Detman calls abstract adaptation, a style that creates a new theoretical dialogue about how film and literature can intersect to reproduce aesthetic resonances. Resonances here meaning a quality that makes something personally meaningful or important to someone. Detman refuses to privilege one reading or form over another and remains focused on the distinct ways in which they have been received. All right. A central message the author is trying to convey about Detman's view on film adaptation is that the task of adaptation, A, is to create a new art form while retaining a common narrative with the original text. B, is not simply to reproduce an original text, but to appreciate the dissimilarity of two art forms. C is to completely disregard all elements of the original text in order to create an independent work. Or D is to allow the filmmaker to engage in an exercise of criticism by analyzing literary symbolism. Definitely press pause if you need to and open up a second window so that you can view the passage paragraphs to find the support for the correct answer choice. All right, I'll give you a moment to think. The format of this question stem is Foundations of Comprehension, and what you're being required to do is recognize an accurate paraphrase or summary of the central theme. Okay, so in paragraph 3, the passage notes that Detman questions the assumption that the one thing literature and film have in common is narrative, which means answer choice A is obviously correct. I know it's answer choice B, but let's just, go through in detail what's what, okay? In paragraph 2, the passage author discusses an example that Detman uses to illustrate how novella and film can both map out, quote, key theoretical differences through distinct approaches to the exploitation of women. In other words, the written novel and the film rightly address the same issues from different angles, and there is no obligation on the part of the filmmaker to perfectly emulate the original written text because the film is a work of art in its own right. Okay, so this is what answer choice B is essentially saying, okay? However, Detman nor the passage author get into, they don't go as far as to say that there's no relationship between film and novel, which is what answer choice C is saying. That's why it's correct. And finally, the passage does not argue that film should be a direct analysis of literary symbolism. That's so wordy and erudite in the original text, okay? In fact, the example of the well in paragraph 2 shows that symbolism used to explore certain things can be completely different in order to adapt the content to the film medium, okay? So you can switch things up with it. All in all, the correct answer choice B, is not simply to reproduce an original text, but to appreciate the dissimilarity of two art forms. All right? Okay.